So point number 5, and this is really now where we are getting more into where the loss I've experienced in my life comes into play and how that specifically has changed me. So this is really the meat of this episode. This next part actually is where this episode was born from. What I'm about to share next is very, very vulnerable, but it's like the one thing that I'm a little nervous to say out loud, and this is going to sound a little funny, but I'm just owning this, and I actually think a lot of people can probably relate to this. I almost don't want to say this out loud because I'm scared it's going to like jinx something, but I have had worries and concerns about losing the baby, and almost like on the defensive and almost distancing myself, not from her, but almost from like letting myself get too excited, get too ahead of myself, just in case. That's a hard thing to admit. And I have a lot of extra thoughts and feelings that just came up. See, this is why I didn't want this to be a very scripted episode, because I wanted to just allow these thoughts to flow. As I said that out loud, I felt two things. I felt part of myself give myself permission to feel that way because of the loss that I have endured, which I will touch on in a moment. But a part of me was like, don't you worry. You're going to be okay. Baby's going to be okay. There are no guarantees in life. That's right. There's also no space to worry, right? Like worry is a natural human emotion. So I'm not at all implying that we can't worry about things in life. But earlier on in my pregnancy, this was more prominent. And I've really began to release a lot of this. And so it's just so interesting that this point is sort of what brought this episode to life in a way. And I'll be honest with you, I really sat on this episode for several weeks before hitting record because I knew things were going to continue to grow and evolve and change. And I'll probably even maybe do another, like a part 2 of this later on, sort of another check-in. But it's just differing. It's sort of like the angel and the devil on each of my shoulders, right? The devil is sort of just like, yep, you deserve to be worried. You've been through a lot and here's why. And again, I'm going to touch on that in a moment. But then this beautiful little angel part is like, release that. Release that to me. Release that into the universe and just know that things are happening for you as they are supposed to. And ultimately, what that angel is saying is overwhelming any negative thoughts that I have. But let me tell you, I've had this back and forth in my mind for many weeks. There was parts of me, especially as it was still earlier and, you can't really feel things yet. Your body hasn't really changed yet. You're maybe not like growing. It's very different, right? When you're still in those early days and you can't feel the kicking and whatever, and you're waiting in between appointments and you don't know if they're okay and all of these things. And to tie this back to the losses I've been through, and this is where I really want to validate anybody listening here today who's been through something like this, been through traumatic loss where we're worried that it's going to happen again. Number one, I just want to say you are so not alone, because I've been there. I am there. It's scary. I was scared that we weren't going to conceive. Again, this is not to sound tone deaf at all. I'm just sharing this as a fact. We got very lucky in that we conceived right away. But a part of me, even before that happened, was like, well, it could take a long time. You never know. And my husband, bless his heart, was just like, you have no reason to think that way. Like, where is this coming from? And I realized it was from a lot of like outside sources. It's because I, especially as a woman, hear about other fertility struggles. I hear about all of these things, and I was allowing that to cloud our experience. And I've brought this up a couple times today. It's just one of those things where it's just validating even more that we just need to come within and be within with ourselves and with our journey. And if you find that you are playing the comparison game, or you're scrolling too much on social media and you're seeing things that are kind of like swaying you one way or another, please have the wherewithal to recognize that. It is something that I wish I had done sooner, because I think it would have saved me a lot of heartache and just a lot of stress and worry. And it's hard because I didn't want to stress too much, right? Like, stress isn't good for her, it's not good for me. So it was just this battle that, now that as I'm getting, further into the pregnancy, I'm less and less worried. Anytime that we've gone to the doctor, it's been wonderful news, and she's strong and active and healthy. And I am so, so blessed in saying that. I'm going to say it for like the umpteenth time. I don't take that for granted. I promise I'm not being tone deaf in saying that. I just want to elicit a little hope here today. But also, again, just validate these feelings that if you have suffered losses, so again, my parents, that was not something I saw coming. My mom's diagnosis and the time that it took for her to be diagnosed to when she passed, all within a matter of months within the same year, was very shocking. That lingers. My dad dying 6 months after that, I never would have expected that. That lingers. My dog the following year, that has lingered, how, in a way, that's why I'm giving myself the permission that I am, because there's this part of me that's like, you know what? You have been through a lot, and you have seen a lot of loss, and what you're feeling, it does make sense. But that's when we do have to kind of check ourselves a little bit and be like, it's understandable you're feeling this way. But if we are having these maybe semi-irrational thoughts, for me, I was having these thoughts of, oh my gosh, what if we're not going to be able to conceive at all? Or what if it's not quick? Or what if we lose the baby? I mean, listen, any of that could happen at any time to any of us, right? It could. I'm going to knock on wood on the desk that I'm at right now in hopes that none of this comes to myself or to you or to anybody around you. But that is life, right? That is loss. And I've said it so many times, and I always kind of say this with a smile just because of how I learned this when I was going through my grief coaching certification. But it's this idea that, death and loss, it does not care who you are. It doesn't discriminate. It will set itself on your calendar, and it will not remove itself from your schedule. You can't cancel it. You can't delete it. So if we, again, find this ability to kind of surrender and say, kind of not whatever's meant to happen is what's meant to happen, but just be as present as possible and embrace what we do have and what we do have to be grateful for, that's really powerful. That's a really empowering thing. And that is us taking the power back from these worrying thoughts. You know what I mean? So again, just to kind of close this little mini chapter of this episode, I just want to yet again validate that, if you're having any issues, I don't want to even call it issues, but if you feel like you're struggling, feeling attached to things out of fear of losing them, it's kind of like a defense mechanism. I just want to say that I understand that feeling. It's really hard to shake. I am not there 100% yet, I'll be really honest, but I think it's one of those reasons why I was kind of like laughing, bringing up, being a more defensive driver now. I'm not like racking my brain over it with, hands on 10 and 2, but I'm just, my caution meter is heightened a little bit. And I think that's natural for a lot of us, especially women in pregnancy, but this can apply to just so many different parts of life, right? And I just think that deserves to be recognized. So, number 6 in the lineup of things that I have just had to sort of grapple with really during this pregnancy so far. And this is probably really one of the main points of this episode, in addition to the last one, which I think kind of goes without saying, just having lost my parents. But I obviously could not address their absence and what that has been like and what has been on my mind with that. There's been a lot of things, but really the only way I can kind of put it right now is just everything they won't be here for. Outings on weekends, seeing them as grandparents, and them being able to have a relationship with her. I'm not going to get to see any of that. And I do sort of like to think that they met her little soul and that they held her and all of those beautiful, wonderful things before she came here, before she came to me. But that doesn't sort of make it easier. I think I'm still, actually, I'll be very honest, I think I'm still in a state of shock with a lot of this. So far, I've had definitely some moments where I've cried about this and it's weighed on me a little, but I still feel like it's not really hit me. And it's interesting. I just don't know when it will. I'm not racking my brain over it. I'm not trying to have it hit me per se, but I'm kind of going with the flow, to be honest, with these feelings, and just, acknowledging them if they're bad on a certain day or if it's kind of rough. Just allowing myself to feel that, but also understanding and realizing that they are here, they're gonna be here in other ways. But I just want to say out loud, in case you can empathize with this, baby or not, it is not the same as having them here physically with us, for us to be able to hug them and laugh with them or call or text. I get it. And it's something I'm feeling very deeply. And, it's also very interesting too, having my husband and having his family near us. I know I'm going to be seeing my in-laws have a relationship with her, and they're wonderful people, and it's going to be an amazing thing to watch. But I'm like, God, what I wouldn't give to have my parents be able to have that. Why can't they have that? It's like those ruminating thoughts of why me? Why them? Why? I never pictured my life this way. I never pictured they wouldn't even be there for my wedding, because they weren't, let alone not meet my kids, not here in person, not here in the physical world. So, whatever you feel about the spiritual world, I'm not really here to talk about that today. I'm not here to impose anything, but just want to, just put that out there and acknowledge how difficult that is. And I also just want to mention that there is definitely going to be a little bit more coming in the Losses Become Gains community for people who are going to be parents or already are parents, who are journeying through this without their parents as well, or maybe without a mom specifically or a dad specifically. I have some exciting things planned really across the board, and some things I want to talk about on social media, on the podcast, some other tools and resources and things that I'm ruminating on to really help with this, because I'm only at the very beginning stages of this, and I can already feel it pulling at my heartstrings, and how difficult that is going to be when she's here, let alone all of the milestones that they're going to miss on top of that. So I just think that deserves to be talked about more, and just that very sacred and very special relationship that is absent, and how hard that is to watch, especially if you do have, maybe a partner with in-laws or something around, or maybe you have friends who still have their parents, there and active in their children's life. And that can be really painful to think about and to watch and witness. And so more to come on that. And the last thing I'll also just say about my parents, that I really actually just had this really overwhelming moment that hit me recently. Just number one, how blessed I was and how grateful I am, because even though I wish they had been here longer, I know that so many people didn't or don't have the best relationship with their parents. And so I just want to say that, like, please, again, this is not to sound insensitive. There is this fierceness that they loved me with. And I know I was kind of alluding earlier to not feeling like I've tapped into all of my motherly instincts yet, which I'm sure more will come with time. But I did have this really profound moment recently where I was just like, I already love you so much. Like, it hurts. And I just imagine her being here, and I don't know what she's going to look like yet. Like, it's just this kind of elusive bond right now, even though she's literally physically bonded to me. But it's just this feeling of like, I don't know what I would do if anything happened to you. And I know that's only going to increase with time. And so I just want to, this always kind of like makes me emotional, but just acknowledge anybody here who has had trouble conceiving, or, did conceive and that baby didn't make it at any point in that journey, or, even if the child was crone, right? And just something happened and they're no longer here. It's hard to wrap your head around. And there's always that, whole thing of like, the kids aren't supposed to die before the parents. And I'm just starting to just very humbly understand what that means now. And I know that's only going to go up from here. So I just wanted to take a moment just to honor that. But that's just really a way that I don't know, I guess I feel connected with my parents. I'm feeling more connected with her. It's just this growing sense of responsibility, but also like, I will defend you to the death. Like, no one come after my girl. And that's a really incredible bond that I know a lot of people, it's like grief, right? You don't understand it until you've been through it. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get that when people say it about their kids too. So it's a really, really mind-blowingly incredible thing. All right, I know there's been a lot talked about today, and this is the very last point that I'm going to make here for this episode, and then I'll leave you with all of these ramblings and random thoughts for today. So number 7 here, and I just want to preface this by saying that some of these things I'm not losing sleep over, right? They're just things that have crossed my mind that I think are really important to acknowledge and address if you or anyone you know has or are or will be journeying through parenthood. And this isn't necessarily related to like my grief or anything, but I just wanted to, I don't know, this really came to me recently, and I thought it was just kind of a powerful thing to share, and I don't know, hopefully it resonates. With the birth of a child, and again, I haven't been there yet, so please know that I know my position in this, and I'm not talking as though this has happened already, but I can already start to feel this, so this is why I bring this up. With becoming a parent, right, there's a little bit, not a little bit, there's a lot of it, of sort of a death and a rebirth happening. And we talk about death a lot, at losses become gains. So I think this is why this is something that really occurred to me. There's this death and this rebirth happening. And this kind of comes from a place of like, I know, countless people have said to me that my life is going to change. My husband's life is going to, all our lives is going to change. I know that it will. In bigger ways than I can even imagine right now. Again, I say all this very humbly. I can only mentally prepare myself right now. But I really love this idea of like a death and a rebirth. And what I mean by that is like, I'm still me. There's still very much a lot of Tara in here, of course. But I'm sure a lot of parents out there, I'm assuming, can maybe relate to this, where like you are just not the same person. Like you are, maybe it's like a little same but different once your children or child comes into your life, right? It's like we're stepping into this whole new world in so many ways, like more than I can even probably express right now in this podcast episode. Again, just this sense of responsibility for this beautiful soul that is now in your life and just everything that comes along with that now, right? But I want to focus just more on us as the parents here for a moment. And it's the best way I can describe it. It's like we're stepping into this whole new world, but one where, and I feel like we experience this with death too, right? It shifts our perspective. It changes us. It, for so many of us, makes us like slow down or have to slow down and be more intentional and be more meaningful with the decisions we make, with our time and our energy and where that is spent and what is important. And in a lot of ways, that's completely new. That's brand new. And that's really exciting, at least for me personally. Of course, it could be scary, change, depending on how you embrace change, it could be overwhelming too. And I'm sure I'm going to have my more overwhelming moments in the future, right? But I feel like I'm talking very naively right now. But I don't mean just the lack of sleep and all of that, which I don't do well without a decent amount of sleep. So that's going to be interesting. But, it's this death and rebirth that I'm mentioning. I'm kind of having this realization that I'm going to be born a mother, if you will, along with my baby girl being born too. That's unbelievable to wrap your head around. And my husband, he's going to be kind of reborn a father. And so while there's so many aspects of our lives and of us that certainly remain the same or remain as is, I'm sure that you just can't help but have certain mindset shifts. I mean, there's a reason that, so many people are like, parenthood changes you. And that's something I'm so curious about. I'm looking forward to. I'm very much embracing where I'm at and being very present with it. But I don't know, there's a part of me that is really, again, just so curious and so intrigued by that too. And there's also this other aspect, and if anybody here can relate to just being, I'm not gonna say a workaholic, but really like just inundated in projects or, things that you have going on. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I have been going for so long, so productive and so creative and so all the things for a long time. And I sometimes have to take a step back and ask myself, what's going to happen when I have to take the foot off the gas with a variety of things, with other jobs that I work, with how I spend my time and energy, how that will evolve with losses become gains. Losses become gains is not going anywhere, I assure you of that. But just like I was saying earlier, where I've had to sort of, just adjust my social and blog posting schedule. I mean, what will happen when she's here? I can only imagine at this point. But then there's like this deeper part of me that is wondering, like, will that fulfill me more? Will motherhood be enough? Will all of these things that I've been building and all of this leading up to this point, like, what is all that going to mean? And, I'm not overthinking that at this point. I'm not allowing myself even to think too hard on it because who knows, right? We don't know. I have no idea how it's going to be when she gets here. All I can do is plan ahead the best I can, hope for the best. Losses become gains, and this podcast is not going anywhere. But I think it's more excitement and it's more intrigue about just this next chapter, this next book even, right? There's so much rebirth and newness happening. And it's just kind of wild to think about. And I do think, I don't know, it's funny. In some ways, I think motherhood will be not only enough, but it will probably be the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, other than creating losses become gains and trying to help thousands of people, as many as I can. Probably even more will come to me during this time and after I have her, which is actually extremely exciting to think about. But, then there's like that technical, more masculine part of me. It's like, okay, how do I find this balance? How do I still do everything I want to do in my life here for others? How do I continue to serve? How do I continue to feel fulfilled in my lifetime, but also have all of these competing priorities? That's a little, not scary, it's just a little like unnerving. But I think I will find a new balance. I will have to find a new balance. I probably won't really have a choice, right? Like any of us do, whether that comes naturally or not. I think it sounds like you kind of just figure it out as you go along. Some of the best advice I ever got was just take it day by day, and go from there. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I just also want to kind of start tying this episode up today with just leaving you with that as well. And again, you don't have to be having a baby to be in this place of pondering what's next with excitement, with hope and wonder and intrigue, and perhaps a bit of trepidation. That's, I think, normal, right? And again, depending on how much you like change, how much you embrace change, this is going to look different for all of us, but we don't know what the future is going to hold, right? It's interesting to think about, if nothing else. But with your grief journey, because this is a somewhat griefy podcast, I just want to end this by saying today that I encourage you to take any phase of life that you're in right now, any adversity that you've gone through, and instead of getting wrapped up in that, which I want to say is it's easy to get wrapped up in our losses and in our grief, okay? I'm not saying you need to put that to the side. All I'm encouraging is for you to take a different approach if this is where you're at right now. Any adversity that you've gone through, and instead of getting wrapped up in that, which I know is so easy to do, I'm not saying this isn't difficult, and I'm not saying you need to go put your grief to the side and come back to it later. Again, it's just that intentionality of getting back in touch with yourself and with your intuition, and just taking a maybe slightly different approach. If you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you just cannot move on, do something different. Think about it differently. That is very much what I am trying to do with all of this. I have to tell you that mindset has been very helpful. More to come on this on this topic on this podcast, but just embracing and approaching any next phase of your life. Perhaps it's without someone that you loved, or perhaps, maybe it's the ending of a relationship that you're going through, or you just either lost a job or left a job that was maybe almost like your identity for a long time, right? Instead of getting caught up in the weeds of, oh my gosh, what does this mean for me now? And how is this going to affect me? And this, this kind of, oh, woe is me mentality, which is fair to an extent, right? We're human, we feel these things. But there comes a point where we need to do something different. And I want to credit Amy Porterfield for that little slogan, if you will, this DSD, do something different, because just that little mindset shift can be so empowering, so life-changing, such a game changer, to kind of become our own grief coach in a way and be like, okay, how can I coach myself out of this? And if you can't, there are resources to help you. That's why I'm here. That's why this podcast is here. Everything I do with Losses Become Gains, it is here for you. So you don't have to go this alone. But so much of this wisdom that we find, that we have to find after we've experienced loss, comes from right in here. And if you are not watching this on YouTube right now, I am pointing to my heart. It comes from within our soul. And there's plenty of things in life that we, might ruminate on, or we might regret, or whatever. And that's something else that I've kind of been grappling with this pregnancy is, there's so much that I've done to build Losses Become Gains to the point where it's at. And I want it to just keep going and going and going. I have these amazing major goals for it. And I will sometimes diminish that because a part of me is like, for example, I wish I started this podcast sooner. But then when I really think about that, I'm like, I wasn't ready. What would I have talked about? I wasn't in a space where I even probably understood my grief well enough or was educated on it well enough to be able to guide other people through the same thing. And we're all still trying to figure it out together. I mean, let's be real. We're all just human here. And same with starting Losses Become Gains sooner, or, starting certain things on Instagram earlier, whatever it is. Like, we need this perspective sometimes to not get hung up on the coulda, woulda, shouldas, or the what ifs, or whatever, this comparison game to other people. And so I just want to remind you today, because this was also a thought just to kind of close this whole, episode with this pregnancy news and this pregnancy phase of life. I'll be very honest. This is like a very, you're kind of getting into the mind of Tara with this, but I totally was that girl that envisioned myself being like married by maybe like 25, starting to have kids by 27, and no shame at all to anybody who started their family and everything earlier. That just wasn't my path. That did not work out for me. Instead, I had an ended engagement by 25, and I didn't meet my current husband for several more years. And this baby, I'm telling you, I believe this in my soul, was meant to come along when she did for a reason. It was meant to be right now. And it was so easy for me to be like, well, I see so many people doing it. My biological clock is ticking. I'm 32. I had, my grandma in 1 year, like, when are you going to have kids already? And like all of these things. If I had given into that, I wouldn't be having the same experience, this very sacred experience that I am right now. So when it comes to grief, right, it's not that we have to be happy about who or what we've lost. But now, to bring it back to Losses Become Gains, it's to find, okay, what can we gain from what we have lost? How can we turn our pain into purpose and make this work for us, and realize that maybe this was part of some higher plan, or looking back on it, because hindsight is often 20/20, right? It was not a part of our path. It was not a part of our plan until right now. Something to think about today. And I know some of that might be a little controversial. Again, it's like, I don't want anyone emailing me being like, I was not meant to lose my mom or my dad or whatever. Trust me, I feel you. I don't feel like I was meant to lose mine either, okay? Not at all what I'm saying. It's it's picking up the pieces now. It's realizing that I've said this, I think, on previous episodes, or I've certainly said this elsewhere in my community. We have a responsibility to live our life vibrantly and intentionally and meaningfully, and to do all of those as much as possible for the rest of our life. And that is a really important distinction to make. And I cannot tell you how many comments I'll see on social media or I get in my inbox or wherever that are just like, I feel stuck. I don't even want to be here. This life is like pointless or useless to me right now. I get a lot of parents. I am basically only here for my kids. That is so disheartening for me to hear. I understand it. I do. I was in that dark space. But I will just leave you with this today. Remember that in knowing the darkness, in experiencing that, we as grievers can appreciate the light so much more now, right? Think about that today and think about that every day and use the darkness that you maybe are in or have experienced to your advantage. Know that you can see a little bit better now. You can see and experience life in a way that you didn't before. And that ultimately is a massive, massive gift. And this is also your reminder to give your healing journey time. We might never be fully healed, but we are certainly capable of making our wound more into a scar. It is something we live with. It is something that we might look down and we'll be reminded. I'm going to be reminded of my parents' absence my entire life. That is an overwhelming thought, but there are so many ways that I know that I'm able to work their memory in. I am going to make damn sure my daughter knows all about them and who they were. I will show her videos, whatever I have, talk about them, bring them to life for her. And I hope that you can do that for yourself and others around you today. Okay, that was a lot. That whole last bit just came to me. I can't explain that, but I hope some of that resonated with you. I hope this episode in some ways resonated with you. Again, I wanted to make this so much more than just a pregnancy announcement and like, oh, I'm feeling really good or whatever. I wanted to go a little deeper here. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much for sticking with me through all of this. So much more to come, both with the pregnancy journey, but also just more griefy content to come, more tools, more resources, more inspirational content curated just for you. As always, if there is a subject or anything that you want to hear about or you would love for me to talk about on this podcast, I am so open and I welcome all of that feedback with open arms. So please feel free to, you can either DM me on Instagram at Losses Become Gains or at Losses Become Gains podcast, or you are welcome to email me, lossesbecomegains@gmail.com. All right, my friend, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It is so appreciated, and I'm so excited to just share a little more personal side of my journey, my grief journey with you. And as always, I'm just so thankful for you and grateful you're here. I will catch you in the next episode.